Welcome back to the Real Estate Insider Podcast, where we spotlight the agents who are actually doing the work the right way, even when no one's watching. I think we call that integrity. I'm your host, Jared Sawyer. After 22 years in the mortgage industry, I've seen firsthand that the best agents aren't always the loudest or the ones jumping up and down on TikTok. They're the ones who care deeply about the outcomes, not just the commissions. Today's guest is someone who fits the mold perfectly. Craig came into real estate looking for work that actually mattered. He believes in home ownership and is about stability, freedom, and long-term impact on families, not just transactions. And that philosophy shows up in how he serves his clients, sets his goals, and builds trust in a crowded market. If you're an agent trying to stand out and be authentic, or a consumer wondering what's working, this is a really good episode for you to tune into, because you're going to get a very authentic person who doesn't BS and tells it how it is. Craig, thank you so much for coming on today and making time. Really can't thank you enough for being here.
Yeah, excited to be here. Good to talk to you, Jared.
So real quick to brag about Craig. He's been in real estate now for a little while. He's roughly done 21 to 24 sales last year, somewhere in that range, by focusing really on meaningful client outcome over the hype. And he puts a lot of intent into serving families. And so I'm doing all the bragging for you, Craig, so you don't have to talk about yourself, which is, usually the better way to go. But tell me a little bit about your story, man. Where did you come from? Why'd you pick real estate? What about it has kind of kept you in it?
Yeah, one of my favorite things is when you talk to any realtor, they say, "I just love helping people." It's true, man. We all love it. We all love it. But also, real estate's a good industry to make a lot of money if you're good at it. And I think if people were being truthful, that's what they would tell you. Look, I want to make a good living for my family, for my wife, for my kids, and all of that. So I know that sounds a little self-serving or a little selfish to begin with, and someone might hear that and think, "What?" But here's the thing. When you are negotiating on behalf of other people and you don't negotiate well for yourself, do they think you're going to negotiate well for them?
That's a good point.
No, absolutely not. And that's what real estate is negotiation. I started in sales. Oh freak, I feel old now, but probably 20 years ago.
Feels
And I
quick, man.
started
Yeah.
I started going door to door. I sold pest control. And so I learned by getting the door slammed in my face, how to talk to people and how not to talk to people and how to make a difference in their life. Now, I did pretty good with that. I made a good living and I got moved into what they called the inside sales team, where I started taking sales calls from their offices nationwide from people who would call off their ads and their phone numbers that they had around. And I did really well at that. And I remember at one point I was taking a phone call. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning. I had to get there early because we were taking calls from the East Coast. So here in Arizona, that means an early morning.
Right and early. Yeah.
That's right. And guess what? In the morning, sometimes I was tired. And I remember being on this call and I heard someone say, "Hello?" And I had fallen asleep in the middle of a sales call, dude. I had fallen asleep and I woke up and I was like, yeah, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to spray this barrier around your home. It keeps the bugs from growing. And and look, I ended up still selling them. I still got them on a pest control service plan.
That's
But I hang
amazing.
up the phone after that call and I said, you know what? Maybe it's time I do something a little bit more engaging or it's something that feels a little bit more important.
Yeah.
And that's when I decided to go into real estate. I had a long conversation with my wife because, as you know, when you get into real estate, what are you dealing with? Well, you're dealing with months of plenty and months of scarcity. And so we had to come up with a plan. It's not like people knew me as the real estate guy at that point, but I jumped in both feet. I took the test, got licensed, and became full time from day one.
So, I mean, in our last conversation too, you mentioned a lot about home ownership equaling freedom and sovereignty, and yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great way to make money for sure. I think that's a very attractive to a lot of people when you get into it. But those key words about freedom and sovereignty are really, really powerful. What do
Well,
you mean by that with home ownership?
yeah, so we didn't get into that with my story of how I got into real estate, but that story that I tell you about pest control and jumping in for a bigger, more meaningful purpose, right? I do genuinely want to help people. And I know every real estate agent says that, but it's insincere to think that that help doesn't come because it's just for the consumer. The most important thing in my life is my family. And I think if we're being honest, people resonate with that. It's their family. And so
Sure.
when people look to buy a house and why is a home so important? I have heard so many arguments online about how it's better to rent, like with where home prices are, mortgage rates are, all that kind of stuff. You're going to make more money if you take the difference and you invest it in the stock market. I think on a purely financial level, there is some truth to that. Now, case by case basis, that might not always be the truth. You could argue that, oh, well, if you know what your mortgage payment is going to be for 30 years and it never increases, you can make an argument financially that owning a home is better because your rent is going to go up every year and you're reliant on a landlord. But that financial argument is less important when you understand what it would do for your life. When I look at what caused people to come over from England or wherever to America, it was because they had this promise that there's not a landlord who's in charge of me anymore, right? That's where the term lords come from. I can actually be my own sovereign person, and owning my own piece of the world is part of that. That's what creates freedom. And what's the value of being able to say, I have my home to go to where I don't have to call someone to put a hole in the wall. I can hang up the picture I want to hang. I can paint the room the color I want to paint it. I can create in my backyard the dug in trampoline that I wanted to put in there. These might sound like silly or trivial things, but when somebody has a place, a home base that they can go to and create that life, what's the value of that? Is that worth paying an extra $200, $300 a month compared to what they'd be paying to rent? Is it worth paying $1,000 extra so that you create the scenario, the lifestyle, the situation that you want? To me, it is. And to me,
Yeah,
that's what it
I,
what
I,
it
I agree.
and when someone comes to me and I get to help them do that, that's the most fulfilling aspect of my life or my job, I should say. Maybe not my life, but
No,
don't
I,
don't want to
I think
self-aggrandize my, you know.
everyone knew what you meant, man. And I agree. When you get an opportunity to have that impact on somebody and change not just their living situation, but what you're talking about is an entire paradigm shift in how they view themselves and view a home. It's a dramatic change. I mean, so how does that core belief system and that understanding that how does that manifest or show up when you're advising clients or showing them properties or and maybe on the flip side is, a seller kind of advising them on what to do when they're selling their home.
Yeah. I'll give you an example from just this last week. I met with a seller. She has a beautiful home up in North Phoenix, just off the mountain. Cindy, she's awesome. I had helped her sell her parents' home previously, and she's in kind of like a situation where she doesn't have to move. But for the right price, maybe it makes sense. And so we ran the numbers, and her home is unique. It's not a cookie cutter neighborhood. So, it's one of these houses that could go anywhere from $1 million to 1.3 million, could fall anywhere in within that range. But we're looking at things, and her main motivation for moving was financial, and she's actually in a really good situation with her home. So as we crunched the numbers and we looked at why she loved her neighborhood, and she kept talking to me, hey, I love to be able to go hike up on the mountain. I love taking my animals for a walk here. My dogs, when they go outside, they just run to the neighbors because the neighbors love them. And she had built this community and things around here. As we continued to talk, as a real estate agent, maybe the best thing I should have done for me personally would be to convince her that this is the time to sell. She's got to get the home on the market. It's time to go. But what I told her was, hey, look, you could change a couple of things maybe by just refinancing your current loan and be able to stay in this home. And so that's the avenue she's pursuing first. So I kind of talked myself out of a job, but I could see that it was in the best interest of the client to pursue some other avenues before we just listed her home and had her move and pack up all her stuff in boxes and go somewhere else that she hasn't established with the neighbors yet. Right. So that's how that starts to look on a personal level when I meet with people. It's not forcing them into what's best for me as the agent, but helping them see what are their options for what's best for their life. Now, as I do that, guess what? I create a loyal following. Cindy appreciates me. Cindy trusts me. And so then I am able to grow my business because I know when she's talking about real estate, she's going to say, hey, you got to call my guy, Craig. And so short term, maybe not the best move. Long term, that's how I continue to grow. And that's why I work by referral, is because as I do what's in the best interest of my clients, not only does it benefit them, but they pass my name along, and selfishly it benefits me. And that's what we want to look out for, is that win-win scenario, which I think nowadays is more difficult to find.
I agree with that. I think it's really difficult sometimes in our line of work to see the bigger picture sometimes, right? Because we're trying to get sales. I mean, that's what we do. But I think it's critical, especially with the scenario you just described, Cindy, where you have to take your commission check out of the picture. You got to look at the client and treat them like family. And what would you tell your family? Like, hey, this is what you need to hear. Pause on this. You clearly want to be here, right? You want to be in this home, and you have an industry knowledge and the wherewithal to be able to tell her, hey, look, do X, Y, and Z, and you'll be able to stay in here. I mean, it's not just adding value, but it's also really kind of reinforcing that level of integrity that you have, Craig. And so I think it's really admirable, man. I truly, and people need more of that. The world needs more of that in a big way. You kind of take it a step further. How much different would society be if we all operated that way, right? If we looked at what's the best interest of the person that's right in front of us versus our own immediately. But like you said, it reciprocates. It goes back around. I mean, clearly, you've had a really good year, 21, 24 sales somewhere in there. Even with people considering this to be a slower market, what are you maybe doing different than a lot of the other agents that maybe you rub shoulders with out there that's allowing you to stay consistent and busy?
That's a good question. To know what I'm doing totally different, I'd have to pay more attention to what other agents are doing.
That might be what you're doing different is you're not paying attention to other agents. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. And there's some, I'm sure value to trying to copy your competitors, especially people that are doing things well. I've had great mentors in the real estate industry, but I think the most important thing is, like you said, living with integrity and paying attention to what's best for your clients. 21 to 24 sales. Is doesn't sound like a ton, but in a market where there's agents getting out of the market and there's been fewer transactions, it ended up being one of my better years overall financially. But that's because the thing I'm doing is looking out for what's going to be best. I think there's two secrets to being successful in real estate. Looking out for your clients, which we've talked about a lot. But the second thing is not being a secret agent, being willing to show my personality, to put myself out there. Look, I did this dumb 30-day challenge on Instagram where I walked barefoot for 30 days up and down my driveway, which is a gravel driveway, to toughen up my feet.
Was this in the
So
summer?
yeah, this was in this. Well, no, this
Okay.
was just a couple months ago. So around Christmas
Okay.
time.
I was gonna say, man, if this was in July, that would be maybe detrimental to your health. But
My
yeah,
feet aren't that tough yet, Jared. Jeez.
no coal walk or
But
fire walking yet. Got it. Okay.
yeah, I did it for fun. And it's a way of showcasing my personality, of being out there with people, knowing that you're going to interact with someone that's real. I think that's the biggest thing is I'm not just always trying to have a sale. I'm not trying to just make money. Yes, I want to make money. I'm not going to be shy about that. When you meet with me, we discuss, hey, this is what I charge and this is why I charge it. And I love to feed my family, but we're also going to have fun. Like part of this game of life, and I love calling it a game because it helps me not take it so serious, is having fun and enjoying ourselves, is creating those relationships beyond the transaction, being able to, while we're in the transaction, enjoy the process. Because packing up all your stuff, whether you're selling a house and moving into a new one and you have to have a house that's contingent to make it work, or you're buying your very first home and you're still just moving from somewhere else, I don't care who you are, that's stressful. It's a lot of work. You have to organize all your stuff, and then you're wondering, what did I put where? What box was that in? Should I organize it this way or that way? Did I sign the right paperwork? How much money is this? There's just so many things that get brought up with moving that if we can have fun in the process, it just makes life all that much better. And I think that's one of the bigger things that I try and do when I'm in an interaction with people.
Well, I think that's a beautiful thing. Yeah, you need to have fun. Because if you don't, it's just be really boring. I mean, talking mortgages is just nothing but debt and numbers, and real estate is a house. But the attitude and the personality that you bring to the table with that, I think is going to probably, I mean, just from talking to you, it's going to bring that out of people, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably where, a lot of the fun comes from is getting to know the people, finding out what makes them tick, and really creating that bond. That's why, I mean, what I get from you, and I could be wrong, you could be an absolute TikTok icon, and I just didn't do enough research here, but I'm guessing that you're more along the lines of being authentic than just flashy. Am I reading that correctly, or am I way off here?
Yeah, you're reading that right, man. When I make my millions from TikTok, I'll let you know. But first, I'd have to open a TikTok account. I'm still stuck on
That would be a good
Facebook and
step. Yeah.
Instagram. I'm just an old guy. So
No, you're good. So there are some agents out there that do that stuff, and I'm not trying to knock them necessarily, but at the same time, I have noticed a theme in my career with agents that I've seen that have done really well, and they follow the same lines of what you're doing. So why do you think authenticity really hits home versus the flash and dash kind of method?
yeah, that's an interesting conversation, right? What is authenticity in the first place? Like, how would you define that?
Being
And
just who
here's
you
why.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
being who you are. Okay. But but do people want the you when you're angry?
that's a good question.
Do people want the you when you're being selfish? Do people want the you when you just want to sit in front of the TV and not talk to anybody? No, probably not.
Probably not. Not even our wives. Yeah. Probably not. Yeah.
Probably not. They want the you that feels connected. They want the you that is putting your best foot forward, trying to do your best, right? They want that kind of authenticity, but they don't want the guy that gets upset with his kids because they drew on the wall or something like that. But they do want to know, oh,
Yeah.
hey, I've had that issue before too. My kids are drawn on the wall. They want to know that, okay, in reality, I understand why someone would be upset about that. They want that ability to connect. I think that's what, for me, authenticity is. They don't want the bad parts, but they do want to be able to connect and relate. And the more we can try
Well
and
said.
relate to a person, the more it makes sense. Because I've also been on the other end. Have you ever experienced this where you're talking to somebody and they're the nicest person in the world and you're like, this person doesn't relate to me at all. They're just saying
They're
yes
way
or
too nice. Yeah.
yeah. Like, I'll give you an example. I remember I was a little kid and my aunt, I won't tell you which one. I have enough that it'll get lost in the process here. None of them will be able to know who I'm talking about. But she was giving a compliment to one of my cousin's dads, saying how good he was at packing up because they were going on a road trip. And she's like, oh, he just fits everything in like Tetris. He's doing such a good job. And then she looked and she saw me and she says, your dad's really good at it too, being super nice. She wanted to make
Right.
sure that she didn't say anything, but I could care less if she thought my dad was good at packing. I didn't feel like that compliment was sincere because she was saying it about my uncle, somebody else, right?
Right.
So it's not about being nice, like that doesn't relate, but it's about being real and being able to connect.
It's well said, man. So as you present yourself, what sort of clients are you trying to attract? Because I mean, there's a whole spectrum of people out there looking to buy and sell homes. How do you identify your people and then how do you find your people?
Who do I connect with the most? These podcasts are so fun because you get to talk about yourself so much, right?
That's the whole point. Yeah.
what do what does a client look for? Like, is a client looking for someone that's all full of themselves? No. So who connect to the most are our families. Look, I've done things from divorces to estate sales where somebody's passed, and each one of those is a special situation where I relate to people and I want to have the best for them. I remember helping Kathy. Actually, her son called me because she had just moved to North Carolina to be with her son, John. And so she didn't even live here anymore, but she had her home here. It was totally empty. It was not in good shape. And I remember helping them work through getting that transaction done from being, hundreds of miles away and getting that home sold for a good price that allowed them to move on and her to be with her son and all of that to the judge who went through a divorce that wasn't fun and they had to sell their home to make things work there. And I'm always happy to work with all of those clients, but those that I relate to the most are are the families. The families that have their kids still at home that are growing, they either need to expand or need to get into their first home, need to create that stability and that lifestyle for their children. And I think that
Yeah. That's awesome. So what I'm hearing is you're attracting other Craigs, really, is what it is. Yeah. Oh, stop. Stop. Humble man to the nth degree. So let's say that we have a new agent watching, because when we put this out, you just don't know who's gonna see it, right? Algorithms will do their thing, and it'll find whoever it needs to find. But let's say it's a new agent, and this new agent is just trying to get their footing. They believe they have a passion for this, but it's not coming as fast as they want it to. They're not getting the traction they need. What piece of advice, if you could go back and kinda think to maybe some of the earlier days for you that worked beyond just the door-to-door type stuff, but some of the other intangibles that maybe kinda put you in a position where things were consistent. What's some advice you would give to maybe a newer agent that's starting out, that's just trying to get traction? Yeah, I like that. That's I hold on. Whoever's watching this, I need you to go back and listen to what he just said there. I cannot explain to you how wise that is. Anyway, sorry, Greg. Yeah, keep going. Oof, I love that. I think it's really good advice. I think more people, not just in your industry, in my industry, need to hear that too. That's really, really solid, man. Not to go to Depressingville or anything, but it's always a question I like to ask. Way out in the future, way, way, way down the road. We're at a celebration of life for Craig. Sitting there, we're telling stories, passing the mic around. What's a consistent theme that you want people to feel or think about you and remember you by? Yeah. That's true. It's well said, man. And I think you're doing a great job of it. Craig, tell the people where they can find you if they want to work with you, man. Absolutely should. And they should buy a home with you. Craig, thank you so much for coming on today. Listeners, thank you for joining us. If you like what you're hearing here, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to work with Craig, I'm going to go ahead and put his information in the description as well. So you can reach out to me anytime you like. Once again, I'm Jared Sawyer. Goodbye. Take care.